Imagine, like, sitting perfectly still in a pitch black room for 18 hours, just completely awake.
Right.
But your brain absolutely insists that only 20 minutes have passed. Or imagine being clinically blind-like, having absolutely no functioning optic nerve at all, but you can still just effortlessly navigate your house.
Because you're literally steering by, what, the glowing energy fields of the furniture?
Exactly, the colored, energetic wiring of the people and the objects around you.
I mean, it sounds like science fiction, or honestly, like a symptom of a severe neurological event.
Yeah, it totally does. It sounds impossible.
Mhm.
But today, we are going to basically take a sledgehammer to the modern, pastel-colored, commodified definition of the word enlightenment.
Oh, I'm so ready for this. Because right now, if you scroll through Instagram,
Enlightenment is just like a highly filtered photo of a sunset.
yeah, or it's printed in that cursive font on the wall of some boutique yoga studio.
Exactly. It's this fluffy article in a wellness magazine sitting right next to a piece promising you, like, abs in 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
We've essentially taken what might be the most profound, reality-shattering concept in human history and just turned it into a synonym for, I don't know, just being chill.
Yeah, we've equated it to a mood. The modern definition essentially implies that, you don't get road rage anymore.
Right.
You drink premium matcha, you wear linen, and you're just generally unbothered by the daily grind. It's so soft. It's completely centered around feeling subjectively relaxed on, like, a random Tuesday afternoon.
But if you actually look at the source material we have in front of us today for this deep dive, and if you cross-reference it with the real heavy hitters of spiritual history, true enlightenment is not a mood.
Not even close.
It is a massive biological shift in human physics,
Hmm.
like a fundamental, permanent rewiring of how a human being processes time, matter, and energy. And our mission today is to really unpack the actual gritty mechanics behind this.
We're getting into the actual physics of consciousness here.
Right, the biological reality of absolute bliss, and this incredibly high-stakes, literal life-or-death world of bioenergy healing.
And our guide through all this terrain is the primary subject of today's sources. A man simply referred to as Osman.
The blind Muslim yogi.
Right, which is just, what an unbelievable convergence of backgrounds.
It's wild. You have these deep, mystical Islamic Sufi traditions completely merging with the ancient, rigorously mapped yogic practices of India.
Yeah, and on top of all that, he brings this incredibly clinical, almost hyper-rational scientific perspective to everything he experiences. We're not talking about a guy who took a weekend mindfulness retreat.
No, definitely not. We're looking at a man with a 50-year practice, and 46 of those years were spent actively teaching.
Right, and when someone has been running an internal laboratory on their own nervous system for half a century, the experiential data they pull out is just staggering.
It really is.
But the twist in Osman's story, the thing that immediately forces us to reconsider what the human brain is even capable of, is that he's been clinically blind for the last 2.5 years.
Right, but when he talks about his blindness, he categorically states that he is not living in darkness.
Yeah, he claims he sees energy fields directly.
The actual energetic source code of reality. And he uses this vision in his daily profession. Because Osman is a critical care bioenergy healer specializing in terminal illnesses.
Which is a massive distinction.
Yeah, this isn't like clearing a black chakra so someone has a slightly better week at the office. This is the ER of spirituality.
Exactly. He steps in when allopathic medicine,
Mm-hmm.
traditional hospitals, oncology wards, standard pharmaceutical interventions, when all of that has completely hit a wall. He works with end-of-the-line ICU cases.
And he claims an impeccable success record in these dire scenarios. I have to admit, though, my initial reaction to reading these claims was just intense skepticism.
Oh, of course. How could it not be?
Right. Distance healing terminal patients from thousands of miles away. Seeing the energetic code of the universe. It violates everything we were taught about standard materialist physics.
Well, it should violate it, because our standard physics is incomplete. What I really want to promise you as we unpack this material today is that we are not going to just dismiss this as magic.
Yeah, we're getting into the mechanics.
Exactly. We are going to break it down as a highly advanced, highly subtle technology of consciousness. We are going to look strictly at the why and the how.
Okay, so before we can talk about miraculous medical recoveries or bending time, we have to establish a baseline. We have to map exactly where we are right now, biologically.
Right, where the listener is currently sitting.
Exactly. Because Osman provides a very rigid framework for human consciousness, and he breaks it down into these distinct levels.
Mm-hmm.
And almost everyone listening to this right now is operating in level 1.
The waking state.
The waking state. But even within this standard waking state, there is a massive divide. He points out that the vast majority of modern humans are completely stuck in a frequency called beta.
Yeah, the beta state is our default. Neurologically speaking, if you actually hook a person up to an EG beta, it's characterized by this high-frequency, low-amplitude, deeply chaotic brainwave pattern.
It's the survival frequency.
Completely. It is the evolutionary mechanism designed strictly for survival. It is the fight-or-flight sympathetic nervous system just constantly idling in the background.
Think about your own inner monologue right now as you listen to this deep dive. How many other things are you simultaneously worrying about?
Oh, totally. The email you didn't send.
The weird noise your car made this morning, what you're making for dinner. That background hum, that's the beta state. It's like, okay, it's like sitting at a computer and you have 50 browser tabs open all at once.
Yes. And the fan is just spinning out of control.
Right. The CPU is running at 99%, and somewhere out of one of those 50 tabs, music is playing.
And you have no idea which one it is.
Exactly. So you are just frantically clicking around trying to find it while the whole system overheats.
That captures the cognitive load perfectly. Your processing power in beta is entirely consumed by managing threats, checking external inputs, and just constantly anticipating the future.
Yeah.
The brain is always scanning the horizon for danger.
Which sounds exhausting.
It is. You are awake, yes, but you are spectacularly inefficient. You are leaking energy every single second. The sheer amount of cortisol and adrenaline required to maintain that state of hypervigilance, it's literal poison to the human body over long periods.
But there is a middle ground here, right? A way to slow those chaotic tabs down without actually going to sleep. Osman calls this level 1.5, or the alpha state.
Exactly. In alpha, your brain waves physically slow down, they become more synchronous, more rhythmic, the frequency drops.
Are you still awake?
Oh, yeah. You are still fully functional. You can walk around, hold a complex conversation, drive a car, do your job. But the internal subjective experience completely shifts. The frantic standing just stops.
It is characterized by this deep, unshakable calmness and one-pointed focus. And the sources mention that Osman entered this alpha state naturally, without any formal meditation training, when he was just 12 years old.
Which is incredibly rare.
Right. His teachers actually noticed it. They saw a kid who was just completely unbothered, intensely calm. But what really caught my attention was his claim about how this state affected his adulthood.
The entrepreneur stuff.
Yes. He says that hitting this baseline alpha state is the sole reason he survived his professional life. He's been an entrepreneur for 30 years, and he cites this incredibly dark statistic. 80% of entrepreneurs fail in the first 2 years.
And we have to ask why they fail. I mean, it rarely has to do with a fundamentally flawed business model. They fail because the physical stress of the beta state literally eats them alive.
The cortisol loop.
Exactly. The financial uncertainty, the constant need to pivot, the late nights, it creates this feedback loop that eventually just breaks the nervous system. Decision fatigue sets in, paranoia sets in. The brain essentially initiates a forced shutdown.
Which we just casually call burnout.
Right.
So if beta is the 50 chaotic browser tabs, alpha's just having one single, perfectly clear, maximized window open on your screen.
Just the one tab.
All of your processing RAM goes directly to the task at hand. You aren't distracted by background noise. But, listening to this, I have to ask, is that all this is?
What do you mean?
I mean, is spirituality, at least at this alpha level, basically just a high-level productivity hack for the corporate world? Are we just meditating to become better capitalists?
Yeah, well, that is the exact trap that the modern mindfulness industry has completely fallen into.
Right.
They package and sell the alpha state as the ultimate finish line. Like, meditate for 10 minutes a day so you can crush your quarterly goals and be a more compliant employee.
It's just a tool for optimization.
Exactly.
Yep.
But the crucial distinction Osman makes here in that alpha is merely a highly efficient processing state. It stops you from reacting purely out of fear, which is why it ensures professional survival. But it is absolutely, categorically not enlightenment.
Not even close.
No. It is just a slightly cleaner way of being awake. It is the bare minimum requirement before you can even begin the actual work of exploring consciousness.
Okay, so alpha just cleans up the waking world. But if we really want to understand the mechanics of consciousness, we have to start dropping the feed entirely. We have to map the physical descent inward.
Right. Moving down.
Which brings us to level 2, the theta state.
Theta is the bridge. It is the twilight zone. Biologically speaking, it is the frequency of the dream state of REM sleep. It's also the dominant brainwave state observed during deep hypnosis or like deep creative flow states.
It's that bizarre liminal space right as you were falling asleep where reality gets bendy,
No,
right?
right, totally.
Your thoughts stop being linear.
Yeah.
They become heavily symbolic, and maybe you get that sudden hypnagogic muscle jerk where you feel like you are falling off a curb.
We all briefly pass through theta every single night.
Right, but Osman has this frightening level of control over it. He can transition from being wide awake in alpha directly into the theta state in 2 to 5 seconds.
Which is a biological marvel. I mean, 2 to 5 seconds. For a normal, healthy adult, the slide from beta down through alpha and into theta takes roughly 20 minutes of lying completely still in a dark room.
20 minutes.
Yeah, the nervous system requires that much time to slowly power down the sensory gates.
He connects this rapid descent to a concept from Patanjali's ancient yoga sutras called pratyahara. But what does it actually mean biologically to withdraw the senses?
Yeah.
Because you don't literally turn off your ears.
No. Pratyahara translates to the withdrawal of sensory input, but it's vital to understand this isn't a physical muting. You don't suddenly go deaf.
Right.
The physical eardrum is still vibrating from the sound of, say, the air conditioner in the room. The skin receptors are still registering the ambient temperature of the air, but the consciousness willfully unplugs from those inputs at the neurological level.
So the data just doesn't land.
Exactly. The thalamus, which acts as the brain's switchboard, stops routing that sensory data to the conscious mind. You cut the feed. The data stops reaching the internal narrator. So you are wide awake, completely lucid, but your awareness is entirely sealed off from the external physical environment.
Which sets the stage for what happens next. Level 3. The absolute bottom of normal human consciousness. The delta state.
Delta. Deep, dreamless sleep. It is the heaviest, slowest electrical frequency the brain can produce while still keeping the biological vehicle alive.
And in the yogic tradition, the meditative equivalent of maintaining conscious awareness in this waking delta state is called nirvikalpa.
Which translates directly to the no-thought state.
The mind completely stops.
Yeah.
The emotions stop. The little voice inside your head that narrates your life. Gone. And this is where we run into the physics of time distortion, which absolutely blew my mind when I read it.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Osman talks about sitting in this delta state for 18 to 20 hours a day. And he claims that subjectively, to his conscious awareness, it felt like maybe 20, 30 minutes had passed.
See, this is a perfect example of a claim that sounds like magic until you actually look at the neurology. We have to ask, how does the brain construct the feeling of time passing in the first place?
Right. Because if there is literally no thought and absolutely no sensory input coming in from the outside world, how does the brain know that any time has passed at all?
It doesn't.
It's like, okay, our normal perception of time is like driving down a highway and ticking off mile markers. I'm hungry. That's a mile marker. My leg itches. What's that sound outside? Marker. Every single thought or physical sensation is a measurement of distance traveled in time.
I love that analogy.
But if you remove all the mile markers, does the highway even exist anymore?
It doesn't. Time, as we experience it subjectively, is just the measurement of intervals between events. An event can be external, like a sound, or internal, like a memory or an anxiety. We have a network in our brain called the default mode network, or the DMN. The DMN is essentially the me network. It is constantly generating a narrative of you moving through time by stitching together past memories and future projections.
The story of me.
Exactly. But when you enter the delta state nirvikalpa, you step completely out of the stream of events. You power down the DMN entirely. Because there's no internal processing of sequence, time fundamentally ceases to exist for the subject.
So 18 hours physically passing in the real world feels like nothing, because there was nothing to measure it against.
Precisely. This is the only physical reason a human body can tolerate sitting perfectly still on a mat for 18 hours. If you tried to force yourself to do that while stuck in the beta state, your mind would fracture.
You'd go crazy.
The boredom and physical discomfort would become profound psychological torture. The only way the masters do it is by stepping outside of time itself.
And we really need to emphasize that dropping into Delta isn't just a cool parlor trick for, like, skipping through a boring Tuesday. It is biologically imperative for survival.
Oh, absolutely.
Delta is a cellular reboot. It is the state where the body repairs tissue, consolidates memories, and literally flushes neurotoxins out of the brain tissue via the glymphatic system. And Osman uses this deeply visceral analogy here to explain what happens when we deny our bodies this state. He talks about alcohol.
The alcohol analogy is brilliant because it clarifies the massive difference between being merely unconscious and being in a restorative delta state.
Right, because people think passing out is good sleep.
Exactly. When someone drinks heavily and passes out, they assume they are sleeping deeply because they are completely unresponsive to the world. But chemically, the alcohol physically barricades the brain from descending into those slow delta frequencies.
It blocks it.
Yes. The brain stays trapped in a lighter, highly fragmented, chaotic sleep architecture.
You are essentially awake in a coma. Your conscious mind is shut off, so you don't remember anything. But the biological engine of your brain is still revving at, like, 5,000 RPM in the driveway all night long. It never gets to go into the garage for repairs.
That's exactly it. The glymphatic system never activates to clear the plaque. The tissue doesn't repair. The system never resets. And that is exactly why you wake up feeling like you were hit by a freight train.
It's not just dehydration.
No, you literally skipped the biological reboot phase of your existence.
Okay, so delta is the absolute floor of what we consider normal human experience.
Yeah.
It is the bedrock. But what happens when a practitioner like Osman pushes through that floor?
Right.
What happens when you drill beneath the deepest dreamless sleep while maintaining total waking awareness?
That brings us to the threshold of samadhi. We are moving from the absence of thought into the chemistry of ecstasy.
Samadhi is the state beyond delta. Osman describes it using the ancient Sanskrit term Sat Chidananda, which translates to truth, consciousness, and bliss. But he is very clear about the mechanics here. You don't just stumble into samadhi because you lit a nice candle and relaxed.
No, the trigger is highly specific.
You have to hold that delta no-thought state for 90 uninterrupted minutes or more. If you can stay in the absolute void, holding your awareness perfectly still for an hour and a half, the floor gives way.
And what floods into the system is not a philosophical realization. It's not a comforting thought. It is a massive biological event.
A physical event.
Yes, as Osman explains that the physical reality of this bliss is driven entirely by an endogenous pharmacy. The human body is equipped with the latent ability to produce its own highly potent neurochemicals. When you cross the 90-minute threshold into samadhi, the brain releases a flood of naturally occurring psychedelics and euphoriants, specifically endogenous DMT and powerful cannabinoids.
Okay, when I read this, I immediately pushed back.
I figured you would.
Because if we were talking about a flood of DMT and cannabinoids, aren't these highly revered spiritual masters essentially just getting high on their own supply? I mean, structurally, a molecule is a molecule. How is achieving samadhi any different from someone just taking a synthetic psychedelic or going to, like, an ayahuasca retreat?
Right.
Are they just biological junkies chasing an internal trip?
It's a very natural skepticism, and it demands we look closely at the biology. While the molecules might be structurally similar, the biological context is entirely different.
How so?
When you take an exogenous psychedelic like drinking ayahuasca or smoking synthetic DMT, you are forcing a chemical key into a receptor from the outside. It is an invasion of the system. The body did not prepare for it.
It's an ambush.
Exactly. As a result, you have to deal with intense external variables. Severe nausea, the physical toll on the liver, the high potential for paranoia because the amygdala is fighting the invasion, and a total lack of control over the duration of the trip. It is an intoxication.
Right. You buy the ticket, you take the ride, and you just have to hold on until it wears off.
Exactly. Samadhi, however, is a biological override generated from within. It is entirely self-induced. The pineal gland and the supporting endocrine system release these chemicals in a perfectly calibrated cascade that your specific nervous system is prepared to handle.
So the body knows it's coming.
Yes, it is a closed-loop feedback system. The body naturally upregulates the necessary supporting neurotransmitters to balance the flood. It lacks the nausea, the paranoia, and the chemical hangover because the body is operating its own machinery rather than fighting a foreign substance.
Even so, the descriptions of this state make it clear that just because it's natural doesn't mean it's gentle. Overwhelmingly intense. Almost feels like an understatement.
Oh, it's intense.
He describes the physical sensation of this ecstasy, not as some light, airy, floating feeling, but as a staggering physical weight. A ton of bricks is the exact phrase used in the source materials.
Yeah.
He tells this incredible story of when he was 19 years old, he was chanting, engaging in intense devotion, and suddenly the samadhi state hit him so hard, with so much literal voltage, that he collapsed entirely unconscious. His physical body simply couldn't handle the current.
The voltage analogy is incredibly apt here. We have to remember that the human nervous system is essentially a highly complex biological electrical grid. When the endogenous flood of samadhi occurs, the sheer volume of sensory, energetic, and chemical data requires massive processing power. The source material mentions another practitioner who entered this state and was literally struck mute for 40 days.
Wait, 40 days without being able to speak a single word.
40 days.
That is wild. It's exactly like a computer struggling with RAM. If you try to run a video rendering program that is massively too large for your computer's memory, all the background applications freeze.
Yes.
The mouse stops moving, the keyboard stops responding. The operating system diverts 100% of its resources just to keep that one massive program from crashing the entire system. In this case, the practitioner's nervous system completely shut down the speech centers, the motor functions, everything, just to process the sheer energetic download of samadhi.
This physiological phenomenon aligns perfectly with accounts across various global traditions, too. If we look at Gopi Krishna's famous autobiographical account of his Kundalini awakening,
Oh.
he describes a physical sensation of liquid light entering his brain. He said it brought an ecstasy so intense it teetered on the very edge of agony, rendering him completely unable to function in normal society or even digest normal food for an extended period. It is a radical, system-wide physiological event.
And it's also really important to note that you don't necessarily have to sit in a silent, perfectly still, cross-legged meditation for 90 minutes to trigger this. The biological switch can be flipped through other means.
Right.
Osman cites the story of Mirabai, a famous 16th century mystic poet in India. She didn't sit in rigid yogic postures in a cave. She achieved these explosive, reality-altering states of samadhi entirely through intense devotion, singing, and ecstatic dance.
The mechanism remains the same, even if the method differs. The goal is unbroken, one-pointed concentration. You can achieve that through the silent withdrawal of pratyahara, completely cutting the feed.
Like Osman does.
Exactly. Or you can achieve it through overwhelmingly focused devotion, where the mind is so entirely consumed by love or reverence for the divine that all other background noise ceases. Both roads lead to the exact same endogenous chemical release and the exact same suspension of the default mode network.
So we have just spent all this time building up samadhi as this ultimate reality-shattering high, the absolute peak of human biological and spiritual experience.
We have.
But here is where Osman totally pulls the rug out from under you. Because after describing this unbelievable state of absolute truth, consciousness, and bliss, he turns around and says that samadhi is actually a trap.
A huge trap.
It is a massive pitfall for spiritual seekers.
Yeah.
Because samadhi is not enlightenment.
This is perhaps the most vital conceptual pivot in the entire source material. It forces us to completely redefine what we're actually aiming for. Osman makes a razor-sharp, uncompromising distinction between a temporary experience and a permanent state.
He uses this analogy, and it's brilliant. The flashlight versus the sun.
I love this one.
Experiencing samadhi, even if it lasts for 5 hours, is like walking through a pitch-black, terrifying forest with a brilliantly powerful flashlight. Wherever you point the beam, everything is illuminated perfectly. You can see the path, you have absolute clarity, you feel safe, you have absolute bliss.
Right.
But the moment you turn the flashlight off or the batteries die, meaning the moment the meditation session ends and your brain chemistry returns to normal beta consciousness, you are plunged right back into the dark.
Right.
The surrounding environment, the fundamental reality of the forest never actually changed. You just temporarily lit it up.
But enlightenment, he says, is when the sun finally comes up. When the sun rises, the light is inescapable. It is ambient, omnidirectional, and 24/7.
You don't have to hold a flashlight.
Exactly. It doesn't require the effort of holding the flashlight. It doesn't require sitting in a specific posture or concentrating. It is simply the new, undeniable default reality. And this is where we arrive at the ultimate litmus test for whether someone is truly enlightened or just a highly skilled biological tourist visiting the samadhi state.
The sleep test. This is where the bar gets set so unbelievably high it almost seems like a joke. The benchmark for true enlightenment is an unbroken, continuous stream of conscious awareness that persists through the waking state, continues fully intact through the dream state, and remains brilliantly lucid all the way down into deep, dreamless delta sleep.
Let that sink in.
Your physical body goes to sleep, your breathing slows, your heart rate drops, but you never lose consciousness.
To illustrate what this actually looks like in biological practice, Osman recounts a famous documented story regarding Sri Yukteswar, who was the guru of Paramahansa Yogananda. Yogananda authored the highly influential book Autobiography of a Yogi.
Right, and the story goes like this. Yogananda is in the ashram, and he walks in and thinks his master, Sri Yukteswar, has literally died.
Oh, wow.
He looks at his master's body, and there is no respiration. There is no detectable heartbeat. The body is entirely stiff, appearing to have entered full rigor mortis. Yogananda is absolutely panicking. He reaches out to physically touch his master's body to check for any sign of life, and instantly, without opening his eyes, without breaking his physiological suspension, Sri Yukteswar snaps, "Don't touch me."
It's a shocking moment because it completely upends our understanding of biology. It reveals that while Sri Yukteswar's biological vehicle is completely suspended in what is known as nirvikalpa samadhi, a state where the life force is purposefully withdrawn from the extremities to preserve the internal organs.
His consciousness was razor sharp.
Exactly. He was acutely aware of Yogananda's physical presence in the room. He registered Yogananda's emotional state of fear, and he tracked his physical movement. He never went offline.
The sources mention another example, Ramana Maharshi, who is said to live in what is called sahaja samadhi, meaning the effortless state. It was his permanent default. He didn't have to go into a trance or hold his breath to get there. He simply existed as the background awareness of the universe at all times, even while walking, talking, or sleeping.
It's just his baseline.
But when I hear these examples, I just think about my own life. I lose consciousness if I'm watching a mildly boring documentary on the couch.
Right. Me too.
The idea of staying fully, lucidly aware while my brain cycles through deep delta sleep is just unfathomable. It's like the difference between renting a luxury suite in a hotel for one amazing night, which is samadhi, versus literally buying the entire hotel, which is enlightenment.
Ownership versus visitation. That is exactly it. And this brings us to a moment of profound humility in our source material. Osman, a man who has practiced rigorously for half a century, who experiences deep samadhi at will, who sees energy fields, and who successfully heals the terminally ill, categorically denies being enlightened.
He just flat out says no. I am not enlightened.
He says no because he applies the exact same rigorous, impossible standard to himself that he applies to the historical masters. He admits that when he goes to sleep at night, he still loses himself in the narrative of his dreams.
The continuous thread breaks.
Right. His continuous thread of awareness breaks. Therefore, by the true definition of the physics of consciousness, he has not arrived. What is so fascinating here is the sheer integrity of that admission. We live in a modern spiritual marketplace entirely oversaturated with self-proclaimed gurus selling digital courses on instant enlightenment.
Yeah, for like $500.
Exactly. Yet here is a man doing seemingly impossible things, and he refuses the title. He's mapping a physics that he freely admits he is still actively navigating himself.
But if he's failing the ultimate sleep test, what exactly is he achieving with this 50-year practice? Because the biological claims here are still staggering. Let's look specifically at how his brain is processing information right now, because remember, the man is clinically blind. He has no functioning optic nerve.
Yes, for the past 2.5 years. But Osman notes a profound difference between clinical blindness in a normal person and what he experiences day to day.
Right.
For a normal person who suffers the loss of their sight, the visual field is generally replaced by darkness, perhaps interspersed with what neurologists call phosphenes, those random, spontaneous flashes of light generated by the visual cortex trying to find a signal.
But Osman doesn't see darkness. He describes his constant visual field as twilight vision. He exists in a state of continuous ambient illumination. He isn't seeing the physical photons bouncing off a table or a chair. He is seeing the energetic blueprint of reality itself.
He's seeing the code.
He is literally seeing the source code that makes up the table.
And he provides incredibly specific anatomical details about this energetic vision. He physically sees what is known as the yogic subtle nervous system. He sees the primary energy channels, known in Sanskrit as the nadis. Specifically, he describes seeing the Ida and the Pingala channels coursing through the human body.
And he sees them in actual color, right? He describes the Pingala channel, which in ancient yogic texts represents the masculine, kinetic, solar, action-oriented energy, as a glowing pinkish-red current. And the Ida channel, the feminine, creative, receptive lunar energy, he sees as a bluish-gray current.
And importantly, he observes the precise anatomical routing of these energetic currents. He describes seeing them run up the spine and physically cross over each other at the Ajna chakra, the third eye center located directly between the eyebrows.
Which matches biology.
Exactly. What is incredible here is how this energetic crossover perfectly correlates with our modern biological understanding of the nervous system. We know that the right hemisphere of the physical brain controls the left side of the physical body, and the left hemisphere controls the right side. The nerves physically cross at the medulla oblongata. Furthermore, the Ida and Pingala map flawlessly onto the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems.
So he's really seeing it.
He is not hallucinating. He is seeing the underlying energetic wiring diagram that creates our physical biology.
It's just wild to think about the mechanics of this. How is a human brain, completely devoid of functioning optical nerves, processing this kind of complex visual data? I was trying to wrap my head around it, and it made me think about a radio receiver.
A receiver.
The human brain is just a receiver, right? It takes in electromagnetic waves and translates them into what we call sight or sound. But the visible light spectrum, the tiny band of reality that our physical eyes can process, is incredibly narrow. Most of us are born, we live, and we die, basically stuck listening to local AM radio.
Just AM radio.
We think AM radio is the entire universe. But Osman, through decades of intense practice and biological rewiring, has essentially tuned his receiver into satellite frequencies. The satellite signals, the energetic blueprints, were always bouncing around the room. They were always there. But they exist completely outside our default biological spectrum.
That framework strips away the mysticism perfectly. It treats profound spiritual vision simply as a matter of bandwidth. What we call sight is a highly limited evolutionary adaptation meant to help us find food and avoid predators in a dense physical environment.
It's just for survival.
It is a survival tool. But if you alter the receiver, if you refine the nervous system through decades of clearing out the noise, you suddenly have access to different channels of the electromagnetic and subquantum spectrum. Osman's twilight vision is simply his brain interpreting a broader band of universal data.
Okay, so if we accept this premise and the math tracks, that these masters have access to the source code, that they have twilight vision, that they can rewrite their own biology to tolerate the massive voltage of samadhi, we slam right into the ultimate paradox.
It's a big question.
Because if you can see the energetic wiring of the universe and you have total control over your cellular biology, why do these guys still get sick? Why do historical masters die of incredibly mundane, painful earthly ailments?
It is the contradiction that skeptics always point to, and rightly so. The historical record is completely full of these examples.
Right.
Ramakrishna Paramahansa, one of the most revered and powerful mystics in modern history, suffered agonizingly and died from throat cancer. Swami Vivekananda, the man who largely brought yoga and Vedanta to the West, suffered from multiple ailments, including asthma and insomnia, and died of complications from diabetes at the age of 39. Yogananda himself passed away in his 50s. The question is unavoidable. If you are a master of energy and matter, why can't you just fix your own pancreas?
Right. It feels like a massive plot hole in the whole philosophy.
Right.
But Osman has a brutal, yet incredibly clarifying way of reframing this entire dynamic. He breaks it down to the fundamental difference between capacity and choice.
Capacity versus choice.
And he uses this deeply evocative metaphor. He calls the physical world the squatter camp.
The squatter camp. It's a very stark, unsentimental image. He asks us to imagine physical existence on Earth with all its disease, gravity, and limitations as living in a dirty, chaotic squatter camp with no running water, constant noise, and extreme poverty. Then, he contrasts this with the higher dimensional planes, the realms where the fully developed causal or light body resides when not tethered to flesh. He likens those realms to a pristine five-star hotel.
So his argument is that these masters absolutely have the capacity to heal their physical bodies. He points to an instance of Yogananda allegedly regrowing a lost tooth, proving that the manipulation of dense biological matter is completely within their toolkit.
Yeah.
They have the power. But they only incarnated down into the squatter camp to do a highly specific job, a mission.
Right.
Maybe they came down to teach a specific group of people or to anchor a specific frequency of knowledge into the human timeline. Once that mission is over, once they have done the grueling, painful work in the mud, why on earth would they use their precious energy to patch up their muddy, tearing tent just so they can stay in the squatter camp a few more years?
They wouldn't.
They don't. They consciously choose to check out.
It completely inverts our modern medical relationship with death. For the average person, death is a failure of the biological machine. It is a tragedy to be fought at all costs. But for a master, death is Mahasamadhi. It is a conscious, willing, and often joyful exit.
Taking off the coat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're simply taking off a heavy, damaged, restrictive coat and returning to the five-star hotel. The sickness, the cancer, or the diabetes is just the chosen exit vector to break the tether to the physical body.
But, and this is the massive pivot of the entire deep dive, Osman is choosing to stay in the squatter camp.
Yeah.
He's still here. And he's not just sitting in a quiet cave enjoying his alpha state. He is actively operating in the most chaotic, painful, terrifying part of the squatter camp imaginable. He is doing critical care bioenergy healing.
And we really need to emphasize the grueling nature of this work. He is operating at the absolute razor's edge of human physical suffering. He is dealing exclusively with terminal, stage 4, allopathic, end-of-the-line cases.
The worst of the worst.
Massive organ failure, aggressive metastasized cancers, deep comas. He is stepping into the room, often virtually, when the medical establishment has thrown their hands up and said, there is nothing left we can do.
So how does the physics of this actually work? Because he claims he can do this telepathically from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
He could be sitting in his room, and the dying patient could be in an ICU bed in Tokyo. How do you affect biology across the globe? He explains it using a WhatsApp analogy, which I found brilliantly simple, but I want to understand the actual mechanics.
It grounds a highly esoteric quantum concept in everyday technology. Osman says that connecting to a patient distantly is practically no different than making a WhatsApp audio call. The human brain, as we discussed with the radio analogy, is a transceiver. It sends and receives. Every human being has a unique energetic signature, a specific vibrational frequency.
Like a phone number.
Yes. Once Osman uses his finely tuned, highly concentrated awareness to locate the patient's specific IP address in the energetic field, he establishes a frequency lock.
Okay, but how does the frequency lock actually transmit healing? Is it like sympathetic resonance, where if you strike a tuning fork in a room, another tuning fork calibrated to the same frequency will start vibrating across the room without being touched?
Precisely. That is the exact acoustic equivalent of macroscopic quantum entanglement. Quantum physics has proven non-locality, the reality that two particles can be intrinsically linked and affect each other instantaneously, regardless of whether they are an inch apart or on opposite sides of the galaxy.
Distance doesn't matter.
Distance is a construct of the physical squatter camp. It does not exist in the causal realm. Osman is essentially utilizing macroscopic quantum entanglement. He connects at the causal level, the level of the universe's source code, and from there he begins to debug the biological software.
But he is very clear about his limitations, right? He can't fix everything.
Right. He cannot remotely fix crystallized physical damage. If you have a severe muscular knot, a severed limb, or a broken bone, he cannot snap it back into place from across the globe. Matter is too dense. But systemic diseases, bacterial infections, failing organs, systemic energetic collapse, autoimmune responses, those are software errors.
Ah, software versus hardware.
Yes, the body has essentially forgotten its correct operating frequency. Osman channels an immense, highly coherent energetic current into the patient's field, acting as the dominant tuning fork, essentially forcing their biological software to reboot and remember how to heal itself.
But this brings us to the terrifying catch of this entire process. Because if this works, if this is a verifiable physics of resonance, why aren't there thousands of energy healers doing this in hospitals everywhere?
Because it's incredibly dangerous.
The hazmat suit of the soul.
Yeah.
He is brutally clear that stepping into the energetic field of a dying person is phenomenally dangerous for the healer.
The risk is immense, and it's based on the physics of entropy. Disease is essentially biological entropy. It is highly chaotic, destructive, disintegrating energy. When a healer opens that WhatsApp connection, that quantum bridge to the patient, energy flows in both directions. You are opening a door into a burning building to pull someone out. The heat comes out the door.
Right.
If the healer does not have a highly developed, incredibly dense causal body, an energetic hazmat suit built through decades of rigorous practice, that entropic chaos of the cancer or the infection will rush right across the bridge and lodge into the healer's own physical body.
It's exactly like an elite IT technician remotely logging into a failing corporate server to clear out a massive system-destroying virus. But the terrifying catch is, if the IT guy drops his own firewall for even a millisecond, the virus jumps the connection and completely burns down his own laptop.
That's a perfect analogy.
Most well-meaning Reiki practitioners or wellness healers simply don't have the firewall for ICU-level viruses.
Yeah.
If they try it, they take on the sickness themselves.
Which is exactly why Osman's work is an elite complementary intervention. He is not telling people to abandon their oncologists or throw away their medication. He is providing a highly specialized service that relies on an energetic infrastructure that 99.9% of well-meaning healers simply haven't built yet.
And that leads to the most daunting question of all. How do you build a hazmat suit? How do you get the twilight vision? How long does it actually take to wire the human brain and nervous system to survive the voltage of samadhi without collapsing?
If you are looking for a quick fix, Osman's answer is going to be deeply discouraging. We live in a culture of instant gratification. We want a pill, or at most, we want enlightenment in a weekend workshop in Sedona.
Right.
But Osman recounts a very humbling story of asking his own teacher, many years ago, how long it would take to achieve true realization. His teacher looked at him and said, flatly, "It will take you 10 million years."
10 million years. I mean, honestly, if a teacher told me that, I think I would just stand up, walk out of the ashram, and go get a sandwich.
You just quit.
Yeah. What is the point? Why on earth would it take 10 million years?
The teacher was referring to the concept of samskaras. Samskaras are the deep subconscious impressions, the karmic residue, the genetic baggage, and the epigenetic ancestral trauma that every human being carries in their cells.
All the baggage.
Every action, every thought, every severe trauma from countless lifetimes leaves a microscopic residue in the subtle body. It is a massive generational accumulation of energetic plaque.
So achieving enlightenment isn't just having the intellectual aha moment while reading a philosophy book. It is literally the physical, agonizingly slow labor of scrubbing out millions of years of accumulated plaque from your energetic nervous system.
Yes.
Osman presents this not as a fun spiritual hobby, but as the literal biological evolution of a species, taking place sequentially within one person over multiple lifetimes. First, you have to perfect the physical body. Then over subsequent lifetimes, you develop the energy body. And only then do you have the foundation strong enough to start building the causal or light body.
And this timeline reinforces the extreme danger of trying to rush the process through synthetic means or aggressive breathing techniques. We return to the voltage analogy. If you try to force the massive cosmic current of samadhi into a nervous system that hasn't spent lifetimes clearing its samskaras, the system physically breaks.
It melts down.
It is the equivalent of plugging a nuclear reactor into a standard kitchen toaster. The wires melt, the psyche fractures.
But I have to push back here on behalf of the listener. If it literally takes 10 million years and multiple lifetimes to build the reactor, what is the point of a normal person, a stressed-out beta-state listener right now, even sitting down to meditate for 10 minutes today? Are we just totally wasting our time if we aren't going to finish the job in this lifetime?
Not at all. The timeline shouldn't induce despair. It should instill deep humility and incredible purpose. Every single time you sit for 10 minutes, every single time you actively choose to take a breath and shift your nervous system from the chaotic beta state into the calm alpha state, you are doing the evolutionary work.
You're upgrading the toaster.
You are literally swapping out a tiny frayed piece of copper wire in your toaster for a piece of fiber optic cable. You are building the hardware. Every session clears a microscopic fraction of a samskara. You are participating consciously in your own deep time evolution.
Okay, let's bring this all together. What is the immediate takeaway from this massive deep dive? Because most of us listening are not going to be doing critical care, bioenergy healing anytime soon, and we definitely don't have 10 million years of free time on our calendars.
Probably not.
But there is immense, immediate, practical value here. Simply recognizing when you are stuck in the toxic beta state and consciously downshifting into alpha can completely save your career from burnout. It can save your relationships from reactive anger, and it can save your cardiovascular system from cortisol poisoning.
Huge benefits.
Or taking the time to prioritize deep delta wave sleep, meaning putting the phone away an hour before bed, cutting the alcohol that blocks the sleep architecture, and letting the brain unplug stops you from biologically self-sabotaging your own cellular repair.
And beyond the practical health benefits, Osman's life and practice fundamentally redefine human potential. It challenges the bleak materialist assumption that we are nothing more than meat machines generating localized consciousness in a dark void.
Oh, so much more.
His documented work in the ICU suggests that consciousness is non-local, that our minds can act across distances, and that we have latent evolutionary capacities we haven't even begun to tap into. When we encounter phenomena that seem impossible, Osman reminds us that impossible just means it is currently beyond our standard physics. The rules of the universe are much bigger and much stranger than we think.
Which brings us to the final, incredibly provocative thought that Osman leaves us with. It's a concept we haven't touched on yet, but it perfectly ties up this entire exploration of reality, consciousness, and time. He calls it the mosquito analogy.
It's a brilliant philosophical thought experiment regarding the relativity of perception.
He says, think about a mosquito. A mosquito lives its entire dramatic life in about 2 weeks. To that mosquito, those 2 weeks feel incredibly long. It feels entirely real. It fights desperately for survival. It finds food. It mates. It dies.
Right.
We as humans look at the mosquito and we say, that was just a tiny, insignificant blip in time. But to the mosquito, it was an absolute eternity. Then Osmond shifts the lens to us. When we go to sleep and enter a dream, we are completely 100% convinced that the dream world is physically real. We feel genuine fear, we run, we talk to people, we experience time passing. Only when we wake up do we realize it was a temporary constructed illusion.
So if we consider the intense relativity of time perception, where 18 hours in the delta state can subjectively feel like 20 minutes, and if we accept the highly subjective nature of our sensory reality,
The ultimate question is, are we currently just the mosquito? We think our 80 years on Earth is this massive, incredibly dense, fully real timeline. But based on the physics of the masters, based on the existence of the causal realms and twilight vision, are we actually just inside a slightly longer, slightly more detailed dream?
wow,
A dream that we simply haven't woken up from yet. When the X-ray machine of modern science is broken and the muddy waters of human consciousness surround us, maybe the very first step to true enlightenment is just humbly realizing that we are still asleep.
that is certainly a thought worth sitting with the next time you drop into the alpha state.
It absolutely is. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the impossible.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.